On his day, the assumption that an individual is having a particularly successful or positive run of form exceeding their usual performance or luck. How often does that day happen? Well, barely ever if you're one croissant enjoying man.
On his fucking day, he's just fucking better than Ronaldinho, better than fucking look.
TRULY Paul Pogba. On his day, one of the best midfielders the game of football has seen in recent times. It's just a shame that day is February the 29th. A £100 million man and a World Cup winner, there is absolutely no doubt in Paul Pogba's natural ability. But after PEDs, hyenas and family fallouts, it's been a disastrous few years. A move to Monaco spells hope, but this is Paul Pogba's last chance. You know what's crazy, yeah? He failed a drugs test, but his biggest crime? Dabbing. His rap sheet is just terrible TikTok dance moves that were made popular in 2019. Your biggest crime? Not being subscribed to this channel, okay? We're hoping to hit 750,000 subscribers, and when we do, I'll be testing out that knee injury, okay? Real life football video coming soon. And let's get this video to 7,000 likes, okay? You unlock the next upload when you do, so make sure you hit it. So why are we here? Well, like a quadrillion years ago, two particles. Paul Pogba has a new club, okay? He has signed for Ligue 1 outfit Monaco in a bid to avoid paying tax. I mean, return back to the pinnacle of football. Honestly, with the way his last few years have gone, look, you know, Ligue 1 is sponsored by McDonald's. It might have to be time for him to put the fries in the bag over in France as well. Their front four looks like a social experiment for next season, you know. Minamino, Anthony Martial, and Fati. Look, I know he's been banned from the game and he might have gone McDonald's, but that seems harsh to call Pogba that. I know for a fact, yeah, Takumi Minamino and Paul Pogba have never, ever had an interaction in their whole lives. They've never had a conversation. What do they even have in common? Some FC26 starter-looking squad. Why are you there? Graham Souness, absolutely fuming at the news, by the way. He's just said, wee bonbon. He's got to get down to hating business again. He's already desperately learning how to say send him back to Africa, but in French. And he'll be running out of the commentary box straight down onto the pitch to clamp the Frenchman as soon as he brings out his first dab. I can't blame him. I would as well. You just have to wonder, where's his tax bill in all of this? Let's be honest, whilst he's been a great player at times during the course of his career, he does get a little bit distracted by the other things in life sometimes. Monaco coaches will be asking him to focus on his training instead of getting a 17th trim of the season in November, only to realise they're too late.
I already did.
What?
I said I already did.
Here we have scenes of him breaking out a 2025 TikTok dance compilation, whilst the rest of his teammates are scrapping Marseille players in the background. Now listen, whilst French football at the moment has about as much money in it as the back of a homeless man's sofa, Monaco themselves are at least relatively speaking thriving. They've just finished third in the league and booked themselves a place in the Champions League, finishing marginally behind Marseille, not so marginally behind PSG, but they have a sensational youth set up over there and a pretty decent squad as well. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised on paper that a player like Paul Pogba is getting this move. His footballing career started all the way back in 1999 for a local hometown club. 7 years later, he'd go on to sign for a club called US Torcy, who are known really for bringing up youth academy players, even though they play in the lower fringes of French football. And then 1 year later, he'd signed for Le Havre, another team known really for bringing up young French players. An academy that's seen the likes of Lassana Diarra, Steve Mondonda, Dimitri Payet, and a young Riyad Mahrez. He'd captain their youth team, taking them to second place in the league in the under-16s division, as well as representing France for junior age groups. He was already a star in the making, and big clubs would come calling. Not for the first time in his career, next would come controversy. Even from an early age, bro, I know that he was involved in a scandal like during GCSEs somehow or something. For facts, yeah, he was the kid that was selling sweets to other children in the playground for extortionate amounts.
Bang. Sold out, boys.
Manchester United would come calling and would announce that they were signing the French youngster. Le Havre were fuming. They said they had some kind of future contract in place for him and questioned the legality of the move. They took it to FIFA, where they lost in court and were even accused of Paul Pogba's former team of doing the exact same thing to them. It was handbags at dawn, but he was now a Manchester United player. And at youth level, he would be key for the Red Devils. He starred for their under-18s, ultimately winning Manchester United the FA Youth Cup and creating this just cold image with the rest of some of United's graduates. Paul Pogba, Jesse Lingard, Ravel Morrison, Distoni, and graduation to United's senior squad looked certain. Only a breakthrough in the next campaign didn't really come at the rate that he was expecting. He had little bit part moments playing in the League Cup. He made his professional debut in the league and also even got a little bit of a cameo in Europe, but ultimately he barely ever made any starts. More drama would come when Sir Alex Ferguson branded him as disrespectful, and Paul Pogba, translated from French, basically said, "Bun you, old man," and and got himself out of there. It's a decision that Sir Alex Ferguson has been criticised for, letting a player of his clear ability and clear potential leave on a free. Maybe the dementia had just kicked in by that point. Sir Alex, I'm sure, startled by the player that Paul Pogba would go on to be whilst watching him on TV in the nursing home. Now, he had his breakout, obviously, at Juventus. We all know the story. He scored bangers. He won a 2013 Golden Boy Award for the best young player in world football, and he looked like a world beater. He had like every ability as a footballer, as a midfielder that you could possibly need. He was skillful, creative, and his passing range was incredible. He was strong, and he could clatter one into the top corner from about 45 yards out. The only issue, though, as has been the issue with many good players over recent, years and maybe the last decade, is that Manchester United, they wanted him back.
I'll say this directly to Man United fans, just lower your expectations, man.
105 million euros, an announcement video with Stormzy. Social media was on fire.
It's absolutely electric.
But unfortunately, Paul Pogba's move back to Manchester United would end in more of an arson attack for everybody involved, rather than just a small flame. Truthfully, Graham Souness's new voodoo doll was a little bit slow to get going. 105 million euros at this point in time was, well, it was literally record-breaking. And so, if you were going to come in for that amount of money, with the stature that he had and how things had gone for him at Manchester United beforehand, the furore, the general excitement, there was a lot of pressure ultimately for him to hit the ground running early doors. This was a Manchester United team that hadn't fully recovered from Sir Alex Ferguson leaving, but were definitely making statement signings and heading back sort of at a very slow rate towards where they may have been in 2012 or 2013. There were little sparks of excellence. Ultimately, Manchester United were playing in the Europa League and even scored in the final as the Red Devils lifted their first continental competition in 9 years. But he was criticised pretty heavily by pundits in the UK for his attitude, for his conduct, and generally speaking, his languid style of play. Who the hell made the word languid, by the way? We've got to have a word, because I don't like that one. It's like if it was a person, I wouldn't trust a person called languid. Are you out of your mind? Sorry, I got distracted there. I do apologise. Like Paul Pogba when he walked past the barbershop. The second season was both better and worse. Now, better for Manchester United, maybe worse for Paul Pogba. Performances were just as kind of erratic in terms of whether they were good or whether they were bad. When he was good, he was excellent, but when he was bad, it kind of felt like he didn't want to be there at all. There were injury issues early on in the season, which really didn't help. He was once again criticised pretty heavily by pundits, and he even started to get dropped for important games where Manchester United would have to do a lot more defending because, to be honest with you, he didn't really seem like he wanted to do all that much of that. And being chosen in favour of him was Scott McTominay. More importantly, really, than all of that, though, was the breakdown in his relationship with manager Jose Mourinho. Now, that's not a difficult thing to do. I'm pretty sure Jose Mourinho could have a breakdown in his relationship with Jose Mourinho, but it really started to get out of hand. They were seen clashing in training, and he was even branded a virus that kind of spread through the rest of the United squad at a time where they really were struggling. Saying that, they did manage to recover to second place, thanks in part to him scoring a famous brace against Manchester City, even though Jose Mourinho wanted to run onto the pitch and dislocate his fibula most of the time. Then, though, would come the most important point of his career, the 2018 World Cup. Off the back of what had been definitely a mixed bag. It was definitely not a failure, but it definitely wasn't a success so far at Manchester United. Paul Pogba was at least still putting in sensational performances for France. He was massively informed for them, and I think that's what was keeping people going in terms of his expectations and him finally turning a corner at Manchester United. Because after disappointment at Euro 2016, being defeated in the final to underdogs Portugal, for the 2018 World Cup, and France would go on an absolute scorcher. They looked by far and away the best team in the tournament, and Paul Pogba was absolutely key to that. He'd form a monstrous midfield duo with N'Golo Kante, providing opportunities for the likes of Antoine Griezmann and Kylian Mbappe, who probably picked up more of the plaudits based on the amount of goals they scored, the emergence of people like Benjamin Pavard as well. But truly and honestly, Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante in midfield were an absolute joke to play against. There were consistent performances all the way to France reaching the final by beating Argentina 4-3, beating Uruguay 2-0, then beating Belgium 1-0. In the final, he'd then score against Croatia, defeating them pretty comfortably, and he was, at that moment, a World Cup champion. Not just a World Cup champion, but a World Cup champion who'd, been key to his side's success. That was almost like a moment where we looked at Paul Pogba and said, you have fulfilled the potential that you actually showed as a youngster. And some confidence would clearly leak into his next season, his third season at Manchester United, as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took the reins at Old Trafford. Now, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is almost like a bit of an enigma for, wait, what did you call me? A bit of an enigma for most fans, I feel like, that didn't or that don't support Manchester United. There were elements of of real banter era to it. You know, some crazy times, a lot of moments where we thought, oh, he's finally going to get the sack. You know, the meme stuff of him starting off so well and Rio Ferdinand's quote on TV where he slams the check down on the table.
Ollie's lit the wheel, man. He's doing it. He's doing his thing. Man United are back.
Truth be told, though, really looking at kind of what Manchester United had become after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I think times were good back then. If you're a United, again, I'm kind of talking objectively. I don't even like United. It kind of felt like a free sort of fun time, probably, to be a Manchester United fan. They played like pretty exciting football. It was a bit kamikaze at times, but they had exciting footballers. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was still in charge during lockdown, right? Because lockdown Manchester United was fucking insane. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Season 3, it started really well. You know, he clicked with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer very nicely. You could definitely tell some confidence had come from his World Cup campaign. There was then a bit of a fall off, to be honest with you, for Paul and also for Manchester United. They won like 2 of their last 12 games in the season. He'd still make the PFA team of the season. The first time, realistically, he's even got close to reaching that in his time at Manchester United, which was an impressive achievement, despite getting a bit inconsistent towards the end of the campaign. Either way, the fall off, though, was near. Ollie left devastated after seeing the term "how to hit the griddy" in his YouTube search history. The poor lad's, I think he just has ADHD, man. I hate to say it. You already know the score by this point. Season 4 would be absolutely disastrous. He'd miss almost all of it due to ankle surgery. Would make it back, though, for Project Restart, and as I said, Manchester United and even Paul Pogba as well were class during that time in terms of some of the football that they were playing, some of the goals they were scoring, the likes of Anthony Martial, Marcus Rashford, really performing. But by season 5 and season 6, once again, instability in terms of how often he was regularly available, as well as just a complete fall off, really, in terms of performance, meant that his time at Manchester United was over. And the phrase, really, on his day was truly coined about Paul Pogba. Because it was true. On his day, he is actually amazing. You know, that World Cup campaign and, you know, the spell after it and even a bit of lockdown football at United and just general pockets of games here and there, like, you know, little spells of 5 games in a row where Paul Pogba looks like the Paul Pogba that you're supposed to be getting. He's one of those highlights reels players. You'll look at his career in the form of a compilation and you'll come to the conclusion, almost like a Moussa Dembele, that he must have been incredible. It just didn't happen regularly enough for a, you know, a record-breaking transfer and a man who was basically almost single-handedly expected to revolutionize Manchester United and bring them back to the glory days of winning titles and winning leagues, not just winning the Europa League. Determined, though, to make his career quite literally look like a chessboard, he'd actually head back to a team in black and white again. Once more signing for a former side, this time flip-flopping back to Juventus. But by this point, this wasn't the same Paul Pogba that had graced Juventus all those years ago. This is the Pogba that they were actually getting. We'll come back to him later, to be fair. Mass injury problems plagued him again. He'd only play 8 times for the club before an absence of a different kind took hold. Yeah, he got banned for failing a drugs test. And it's not the type of drugs test that Jack Grealish fails.
You know what I mean.
He'd be found to have extra testosterone in his system, earning himself basically a 2-year ban. And to be honest, he played the same amount of games in that time as he would have done in the first place. This man took performance enhancers and it did not enhance his performance. Around this time, though, and something even more ludicrous was going on. He was being blackmailed by his own younger brother. If you don't know, Paul Pogba, I'll introduce them here, has 2 twins called Matthias and Florentin. Now, Florentin's had a pretty uneventful career. He's a centre-back that played for the majority of his career, I think, in France for Saint-Etienne. Just from memory, I remember him sort of flirting between playing in Ligue 1 and Ligue 2. Matthias Pogba, meanwhile, didn't really have a very strong career in comparison. I don't think he ever played in the top flight. He was in Manchester United's academy along with Paul Pogba at one point, but I remember him playing in like League 2 at one stage. Then I think he ended up in like the lower leagues of French football. Either way, he didn't stay a professional for a crazy amount of time, and he didn't seem very professional in his outward life as well. He decided in 2022 that he was going to attempt to extort money from his brother, Paul. He was charged. Paul claimed that he was the victim of a 13 million euro blackmail plot from his own sibling. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison in the end, Matthias alleging that his brother used black magic during the healing of an injury and buried a hyena somewhere in order to return back to football a little bit quicker. Not only that, but Paul was actually held at gunpoint by some of his childhood friends during the process of all of this. And in the end, out of fear, basically paid 100,000 euros to this gang that included his own brother. I remember seeing this story, right? I don't even have any jokes for this segment because I genuinely think the story in itself is crazy. I did not script a single thing for this. I remember seeing this story and just thinking, I think you just got to pack it up at that point. You know, I think when that's happening to you, you almost have to go, look, listen, right? Is being 84 rated on FIFA really that important? I might have to just go home, see if the family's okay. Let's just, hopefully Florentin wasn't involved. I actually don't Monaco. No, I don't think he was. He's playing in France. Let me just go chill with him for like a couple weeks. We'll go on holiday. We'll go to Barbados or something. We'll go again next season. Check on Mumsy, because this is all getting a little bit too close to home now. To be fair, maybe he did a bit too much of that, given he then failed the drugs test. But either way, honestly, I think a story like this really, really does a great way to conclude on what Paul Pogba's career has been up to this point, because it just does feel like it's been a selection of constant what the hell is going on. And look, listen, I watched this kid play for Juventus, all right? I saw him help them to a Champions League final for the first time in like a decade or something. He was mental, like absolutely, it was insane. It's not some myth. We all love to talk about Moussa Dembele. I mentioned him earlier, yeah. I always see tweets about him. And Moussa Dembele is a fucking amazing footballer. And there's a bit of a myth about him because everyone says he's the hardest player they've ever played against, like in training. Predominantly speaking, that's from a dribbling, strength, athleticism aspect, right? Moussa Dembele is not necessarily the best passer of a ball. He doesn't necessarily have the best footballing mind out of the other players that were playing at Tottenham at the time. Paul Pogba legitimately had everything. You can argue that he maybe didn't have the attitude that was spoken about in detail by many pundits in this country. And honestly, given some of the things that have happened throughout the course of his career, maybe you could argue they were right. But it is such a shame, honestly, to really, I think, look back on his career up to this point and say, no, he didn't really hit the heights that he should have done. And that's crazy to say. The guy won the World Cup and was key to that French side. And yet we can probably still say he should have been more. But the reason I bring up the French World Cup and, you know, that glory in 2018 is because although Paul Pogba, I'm sure that his best years are behind him, he's been out of the game for 2 years as well. He's basically not played since like 2022, basically. Is he going to come back in and set Ligue 1 alight? I honestly doubt it, just based on the fact that he's been gone for so long. But honestly, if he can rekindle and just tap into whatever he was on at the 2018 World Cup, there might be a chance that we see, you know, the joy that Paul Pogba can bring out of viewers actually on a football pitch, because he was always entertaining to watch. Honestly, it kind of surprised me a little bit when I saw that he was signing for Monaco, because I think that's a pretty decent gig given how his last 4 years have gone. Now it is time to prove to everybody that he can still do it, because genuinely speaking, if it doesn't work for him here, I think it may well be done. But what do you make of Paul Pogba signing for Monaco, and will he be able to bring back the old Paul Pogba? Will we finally see Paul on his day? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you have enjoyed this video, feel free to slap a like on it. Of course, subscribe if you are new to the channel. It really, really does help me out. You can also follow me on social media. It is at @theofficialfng on Twitter and on Insta. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.